defense. Mr. Speaker, last week the Obama administration did something that could go down in history as a crossroads in European-American relations. And I am afraid that this and future American generations may be gravely affected by his decision. The administration decided to abandon U.S. plans for a ground-based missile defense site in Europe. And I believe the President fundamentally disgraced this nation by breaking his word to our loyal and courageous allies in the Czech Republic and in Poland. Mr. Speaker, America has become, among many reasons, it has become the greatest nation in the history of the world because our word has meant something. The announcement to abandon the protective missile defense shield in Europe has fundamentally altered that paradigm. After the decision was announced, the newspaper headlines in Poland and the Czech Republic stated the situation in the very starkest of terms. One Polish newspaper had the headline, quote, "Betrayed." Betrayed. Wow, that's heavy stuff, Mr. Speaker. The U.S. has sold us to the Russians and stabbed us in the back, unquote. The Czech Republic, the daily Lidové Noviny, commented, quote, "Obama gave in to the Kremlin," unquote. Mr. Speaker, President Obama's decision to abandon our faithful allies and instead to placate Russian belligerents came on the 70th anniversary to the exact day of the Soviet Union's invasion of Poland, after two of humanity's most notorious monsters, named Stalin and Hitler, insidiously agreed to divide the nation of Poland between themselves. Our allies deserve better than that, Mr. Speaker. After they stood bravely in the face of Russian aggression and paid a profound political price to stand by us, they had a right to expect America to keep her word and to stand by them. And Mr. Speaker, ironically, Mr. Obama's terribly flawed decision for abandoning the European missile defense site has everything to do with primarily Russia. Russia has always hated the missile defense plan because they don't want an American presence in their former empire, knowing that this would diminish Russia's influence in the entire region. Even though the European site would not threaten in any way Russia's military capability, there's no way that 10 ground-based interceptors can have any real effect on the Russian Federation nuclear strike if they chose. Russia's leaders know that if American radar is placed in the Czech Republic and American missiles interceptors are placed in Poland, those two sovereign countries would be stepping further away from the shackles of Russian oppression in the East and joining with America in the West in the cause of democratic independence and human freedom, Mr. Speaker. But Russian belligerence notwithstanding, reports surfaced in March of this year indicating President Obama had covertly offered Russians a promise that the United States would cease moving forward with the deployment of the ground-based missile defense site in Europe if Moscow, this is unbelievable to me, Mr. Speaker, if Moscow would commit to helping to discourage Iran's nuclear programs. Now, let us just recall for a moment, Mr. Speaker, that it was Russia that actually delivered nuclear fuel to Iran already. And they were paid Russia's paid $800 million by Iran for its work on the Bushehr nuclear reactor, which will help Iran make their own nuclear fuel for weapons. And Russia has been strongly suspected of aiding Iran's already advancing missile program itself. Moreover, just this week, Mr. Speaker, Venezuela's Hugo Chavez announced that they were purchasing more than $2 billion worth of arms from Russia, including rocket technology, and has already declared, Mr. Chavez, that is, has already declared that Venezuela will get started on a nuclear program with Iran's help. Mr. Speaker, asking Russia to choke off Iran's nuclear program while ceding our only defense against Iranian long-range ballistic missiles is as illogical as a police officer offering his bulletproof vest to a gang of violent criminals in exchange for verbal assurances that they won't use their guns. And our allies, potential allies, rogue nations and terrorist groups all over the world, Mr. Speaker, were watching President Obama's capitulation. President Obama swore he would restore America's relationships in the world, relationships the liberal Democrats accused the Bush administration of destroying. But instead of restoring America's relationships, he has diminished our credibility across the world and possibly beyond repair. Most importantly, Mr. Speaker, the American people deserve to be told the truth about what we actually lost when the President abandoned the European missile defense site in Poland and the Czech Republic. Today, the nation of Iran is defying the Western world in its determined pursuit of nuclear weapons, which would allow Iran and its proxies to hold the entire peace-loving world under nuclear threat. The most devastating aspect of the President's decision, aside, of course, from forfeiting our ability to intercept long-range ballistic missiles aimed at the American homeland, is that it removed a strong disincentive for Iran to continue with its nuclear weapons program. And that was one of the critical purposes of the European missile defense site from the very beginning, Mr. Speaker. It was meant to create a strategic disincentive for Iran to develop a nuclear long-range missile capability. Iran would have had to face the fact that they were pursuing a long-range missile technology for which we already had a defense. In other words, it would have been like trying to spread a virus when we had already been inoculated against it. Instead, Mr. Speaker, we have forfeited that strategic advantage and we have gained nothing in return. As timelines exist now, and this is such an important point, as timelines exist now, any alternative to the system the President abandoned will come too late to be a significant factor in preventing the nation of Iran from developing a nuclear missile capability that will threaten the peace of the entire free world and its children. Mr. Speaker, if Iran does achieve a nuclear capability, it will officially launch a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. It will allow a corrupt regime whose leader hates America, whose leader hates Israel and the Western world, and who considers Armageddon to be a good thing, to be able to hold the United States and our allies at risk with a ballistic missile carrying a nuclear warhead, much like the Soviet Union did during the Cold War. As a former UN ambassador, John Bolton, has stated, quote, "There is no harm in deploying our missile defenses before ICBMs can reach America. But there is incalculable risk if Iran is ready before we are." Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, Iran may be ready far sooner than the Obama administration seems willing to admit. Recent reports state that Iran may reach a nuclear weapons capability within as little as 1 year. And the New York Times recently stated that Iran now possesses at least 7,200 centrifuges capable of producing weapons-grade enriched uranium, and they have already produced enough low-enriched uranium to make at least one nuclear warhead. Mr. Speaker, I sometimes have the hardest time just stating the facts as they are without sounding like an alarmist. But I truly believe this, and I go on record, and I hope that the listeners, anyone, including you, Mr. Speaker, are really paying attention, that this needs to be said. If the Obama administration continues down this road of appeasement and denial, the nation of Iran will gain a nuclear capability, and they will pass that technology and those weapons on to the most dangerous terrorists in the world. And this generation, and so many to come, Mr. Speaker, will face the horrifying reality of nuclear jihad. And those of us who have been blessed to walk in the sunlight of freedom in this generation will relegate our children to walk in the minefield of nuclear terrorism in the next generation. Mr. Speaker, the preeminent responsibility of the President of the United States, and even of this Congress, is to protect the national security of the United States. I believe that President Barack Obama's abandonment of the ballistic missile defense site in Europe fundamentally betrays that responsibility. I am stunned that he does not seem to understand that. And I am sincerely in fear that our children and our children's children may pay a tragic price for that betrayal. And I thank the gentleman for his time and would be glad to enter into any kind of